The first time I noticed her window, I told myself it was an accident. The second time, I convinced myself it was forgetfulness. But on that bright Tuesday morning, when the golden sunlight poured through our quiet neighborhood and I happened to glance across the narrow street, she was already standing there behind the glass. Her curtains were wide open. She looked directly into my eyes from across the distance. For a long, silent moment, neither of us moved. Then, instead of pulling the curtains shut like she always did, she simply nodded, and left them open. Something about that silent moment sent a chill through me, because it didn't feel like curiosity. It felt like a plea that words could never carry. Before we continue this emotional story, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who believes in kindness and second chances, and subscribe to Storyverse. Every act of kindness, no matter how small, has the power to change someone's life forever. My name is Rowan Mercer, and I had lived in Maple Hollow for nearly 8 years. It was the kind of neighborhood where children rode bicycles until sunset, elderly couples watered flowers every morning, and everyone knew whose dog had escaped before breakfast. Life followed familiar routines, and after losing my wife 4 years earlier, those routines became the only thing holding me together. Every morning I brewed coffee, opened my study window, answered emails from home, and occasionally watched the world outside without really seeing it. Then a moving truck arrived across the street one spring morning. The woman who stepped out looked exhausted long before the boxes were unloaded. She wasn't old, perhaps somewhere in her early 40s, but grief had painted years onto her face. Her shoulders remained tense as though she expected bad news to arrive at any second. She introduced herself only once during the neighborhood welcome gathering. Her name was Morel Voss. She smiled politely, thanked everyone for the homemade pie someone had delivered, and disappeared inside before anyone could ask too many questions. Weeks turned into months, yet Morel never truly became part of Maple Hollow. She never attended neighborhood cookouts. She never decorated her porch for holidays. She rarely spoke unless someone greeted her first. Most evenings I would notice the soft glow of a single lamp through her living room curtains before they closed tightly for the night. Except sometimes they didn't. At first it happened only once every few weeks. The curtains remained open until midnight. She would sit motionless in the same chair, staring at nothing. Other nights she wandered from room to room carrying old photo albums or cardboard boxes. It felt wrong to watch, so I always looked away. Then one morning everything changed. Instead of sitting quietly, she stood directly at the window as though waiting for someone. When our eyes met, I expected embarrassment. Instead, she gave the smallest nod. Not an invitation. Not a greeting. Just acknowledgement that she knew someone had finally seen her. For the rest of the day I couldn't stop thinking about it. The following morning I baked banana bread using my late wife's old recipe. It had become my way of saying things I didn't know how to express. I walked across the street feeling strangely nervous. When Morel opened the door, she looked surprised but not uncomfortable. The house behind her was almost empty despite months of living there. Boxes lined the hallway. Family photographs leaned against walls instead of hanging on them. Dust floated through bright morning sunlight, making the place feel frozen in time. She thanked me for the bread with genuine warmth. We exchanged only a few sentences before I returned home, yet something had shifted. Over the next several weeks our conversations slowly became longer. Sometimes we discussed gardening. Other times we talked about books, old movies, or the changing weather. Neither of us asked personal questions. We simply appreciated having another human presence nearby. One Saturday morning I noticed she hadn't collected her newspaper for 3 days. Concern outweighed hesitation. When I knocked, there was no answer. After another knock, I heard slow footsteps approaching. She opened the door looking pale and exhausted. Only then did I realize how much weight she had lost. Without saying much, I offered to bring groceries later that afternoon. She accepted with visible reluctance, the kind of reluctance proud people have when accepting help they desperately need. As weeks passed, tiny pieces of her story emerged naturally. Her husband had passed away after a long illness 3 years earlier. Their only daughter had moved overseas shortly afterward for work. The house they had shared together became unbearable after every room echoed with memories. So she sold it. Maple Hollow wasn't chosen because she wanted a fresh start. It was chosen because it was quiet enough to hide. I understood that feeling better than she realized. Grief rarely announces itself with loud sobbing. Sometimes it simply convinces people to disappear while continuing to breathe. One warm afternoon we worked together planting flowers along her front walkway. For the first time since moving in, laughter escaped her naturally. It surprised both of us. She apologized for laughing. I told her no one should ever apologize for surviving another difficult day. From that afternoon onward, the curtains remained open more often. Not because she wanted people watching. Because she no longer feared being seen. Neighbors gradually noticed the change. Children waved while walking home from school. Mrs. Callahan from 2 houses away invited her for tea. Mr. Bennett offered to repair a loose fence. None of these gestures were extraordinary alone. Together they quietly reminded someone that loneliness isn't permanent when kindness keeps knocking. Autumn arrived dressed in brilliant orange leaves. The mornings became crisp. One chilly day I found Morel sitting on her porch holding a faded photograph. She finally showed it to me. It pictured 3 smiling faces covered in beach sand. Her husband. Her daughter. Her younger self. She stared at the picture for a long time before quietly admitting something she had never said aloud. She had spent years believing she was no longer needed by anyone. Not after becoming a widow. Not after her daughter built a life across the ocean. Not after moving somewhere nobody knew her name. That belief had quietly become heavier than grief itself. I told her something my wife had once told me during one of life's hardest seasons. People don't stop mattering simply because fewer people are looking. Sometimes they matter even more because someone chooses to finally notice. The tears she had hidden for years finally arrived. Not dramatic tears. Gentle ones. The kind that wash away silence instead of creating it. Winter approached, bringing the first snowfall. Neighbors organized a holiday gathering. To everyone's surprise, Morel volunteered to help decorate the community hall. Watching her laugh with children while hanging paper snowflakes felt almost unbelievable compared to the lonely woman who once stood behind closed curtains. Even her daughter noticed the change during video calls. A few weeks later, she surprised her mother with a Christmas visit. The reunion was quiet, emotional, and beautifully ordinary. Watching them embrace from my front porch reminded me that broken families sometimes simply need enough hope to find each other again. Months passed. Spring returned. The flower beds we planted together exploded with color. One sunny morning I looked toward her house. Her curtains were wide open again. This time the windows framed something entirely different. Friends sat around her dining table sharing breakfast. Children laughed in the backyard. Fresh flowers rested on the windowsill. The lonely silence had been replaced by life. She noticed me watching from across the street. She smiled. Then she waved me over for coffee. As I crossed the road, I realized something extraordinary. I had believed I was helping my lonely neighbor. The truth was she had quietly rescued me from my own isolation too. Sometimes healing doesn't arrive with dramatic speeches or miraculous moments. Sometimes it begins with a simple loaf of banana bread. Sometimes it begins with leaving the curtains open. Sometimes it begins when one lonely person finally allows another lonely person to see them. If this story has touched your heart even a little, please like this video, leave a heartfelt comment, share it with someone who may need hope today, and subscribe to Storyverse. Your support helps these meaningful stories reach people who may need them most.